Ron, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So before we get into all of this, I was reflecting on the fact that you and I have known each other for a number of years now. Prior to me working at GC and you working and building your own company, Arca, we actually worked together at Plaid.
Yep.
So when you first met me, did you ever imagine we'd be here, you building your own company and me as one of your early investors supporting you?
It's a great, super fun question to start with. Honestly, yes and no, and I'll explain. No, as in I had no idea you'd go into VC and you'd be passionate about supporting founders. And no for me, because I always had a dream and passion of building a company. I didn't know if it was going to be immediately after Plaid. But on the yes part, honestly, one of the interesting things about being in Plaid and meeting you there and working with you, and I've told you this story before, I'm pretty sure you don't remember, but when I started at Plaid on my second week, you sat down and you walked me through how the entire business works. Every single economic, every single KPI, what moves the needle for the business. And that really set me up on a great path and foundation there. And then, the roadmap kind of followed from there. So I knew that if I ever had the chance to work with you, I would.
I appreciate that. Before we jump into Arca and the industry at large, I want to hear more about your story. So you came here to the US in college,
Yep.
and I think it's a central part of how you got here and where we're going from here. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and if you actually always knew you wanted to come to the US and build a company here.
Yeah, for sure. I was born and raised in Kosovo. It's a really small country in Southeastern Europe. Growing up there, it was always a dream to kind of be able to come to the US. It was one of those things where both myself and my family had this conviction that I could do more. And if only had the opportunity, great things would potentially come. So worked really hard, got really fortunate, got a scholarship to go to UPenn. So that's how I ended up here. Even in college, I think one of the first realizations was you really can do more here. Whether it's you take on more school and more degrees, or you go and do multiple jobs and whatnot. And so that sort of set this early foundation about being able to take advantage of this opportunity and create value. And so, that turned into kind of working at great companies and learning a lot and whatnot. And at some point developed into this deep passion to really just go, take a bet and build something ground up. So I would say, yes, like sort of a lot of things interconnected that came here and ultimately landed into building Arca. But certainly, various milestones along the way.
I want to touch on some of those great companies and those milestones. So you worked at Cadre, and we mentioned you worked at Plaid.
Yep.
What did you learn from those companies that you bring forward as you're building your own?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Cadre was probably the perfect place to start after college. Took a bet on me as a young college kid to just go and do stuff. And turns out in a startup, you can just do things. And so I got to learn a lot about just 0 to 1 building, whether it was exposure to wealth products early, or whether it was building product 0 to 1, building my first ever team. All of this sort of felt like just accelerant to my early career. And I sort of knew during that time that, company building was probably where I'd have the most fun and the largest opportunity. I just didn't quite sort of feel ready. And so the Plaid move was quite interesting because there the learnings were different. It was a lot more of this strategic kind of product thinking at a much larger scale, figuring out how to optimize, through organization and create this value. And ultimately, what sort of things move the needle for the business, right, at that scale. And I'm sure you have this learning too, and I'd love to, ask you the same question, but being at Plaid, we sort of got this like 360 view of all of fintech, right? Because all these various fintech companies were using Plaid, like 8,000 or so. And so you got to really learn various business models and various value propositions to consumers and businesses. And so it was a really, really good learning place to be able to kind of have both this, yes, building 0 to 1, but building a company is a lot more than just knowing how to build products 0 to 1. So I think the two kind of really complement it well and set up a good foundation to be able to build a company. But yeah, kind of similarly, would love to hear your thoughts. I know you were at Plaid, you sort of like got really deep into fintech as a result. What did you get excited about fintech and also VC, particularly post-Plaid?
Yeah, I think exactly what you just said. Plaid offered a great opportunity to learn both on the company building side and understanding what works well at scale, right? And then similarly, where they sat in the ecosystem, powering I'm impressed you remember 8,000 companies, then, and really getting to see how impactful those companies could be for the lives of people, predominantly in the US, and essentially expanding financial access and building really sophisticated business models on top of Plaid's network. So I thought, yeah, I agree. Learned a lot, and I think as I've gone in the investing side, gotten to see a lot of those models leveraging this important data. So maybe talking about some of those models and an industry that's near and dear to both of our hearts, which is the wealth management space.
Yep.
I think a lot of people understand wealth management at a high level, but maybe don't fully understand the specifics of the industry and maybe even more importantly, like what a wealth advisor actually does.
Yeah.
So maybe just to frame this, what is the problem that an advisor is trying to solve for their client?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so in general, right? Like if you think about wealth building, money building, and what it enables, right? A lot of the times you look at it as just a number or something in the bank account that you've kind of built. But really, it's more than that. It's emotional. It carries sacrifice. It carries time and effort and hard work that enabled someone, right, whoever they are, to be able to get to that point, right? And to us, like we see that as it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to have the chance to kind of have the peace of mind and the clarity and confidence that they're going to take advantage of that opportunity, right? And help them achieve their dreams, goals, and aspirations. And so this entire industry, why I got really excited about it is because you have these incredible people in financial advisors who genuinely care about delivering that value to their clients and helping their clients take the hard-earned thing that they've done and really kind of take advantage of the opportunity in front of them. So I think in terms of, maybe the simplest kind of way of what an advisor does is it all starts with building a relationship and understanding the person, the individual, first and foremost, right? Understanding, do they know what they even want their money to do for them? Do they know, what are their goals, dreams, aspirations? How do they want to use what they've built? Understand their family, their history, their biases, their emotions when it comes to money, and what's giving them the most anxiety. And I think that part sort of, maybe got lost quite a bit in the last, especially decade or so, as obviously technology and everything kind of became front and center. And then from there, how do you build a deeply personalized plan to help you get to whatever those goals may be, right? Like you may be thinking about, am I going to be okay when I retire and be able to live the rest of my life? Am I going to be able to take my kids through college or, other sort of, provide for my next generation, right? So you want to be able to have a really, really good plan that's like incredibly personalized to you and then leverage various tools and portfolios and optimizations to get you to that plan. And then there's a sort of like latter part of this, which also very easily gets lost, which is once you've gotten to that place, right, like to that number or value or whatever it is that you achieve your goals, what do you actually want to do with it? And a lot of the people, right, like work so hard to get to that place, and then it's hard to kind of imagine how do I actually, how do I want to spend my money? So a good advisor actually also guides you through that. And a lot of people sometimes just need that psychological kind of like quote unquote permission, right, to be told that yes, you can go buy this, or yes, you can go, on this vacation or do this for your family because you're going to be okay, right? And so in short, think of it like I sometimes give the analogy of like what a pilot does in a plane, right? Which is, they're there to kind of keep you assured, make sure that you're feeling okay and you're going to be fine during any turbulence, and then make sure that they'll land you at the destination that you wanted to get to.
I like that a lot. And I like the framing around the emotional element versus the quantitative. Because I think when people think about money, exactly as you say, they oftentimes think of that number in my bank account, which certainly is very important.
Of course.
But actually, it's really all of the emotions that go around that number. And that's where an advisor steps in. And so you've spent a lot of time with advisors. And you've met countless numbers, I think it's safe to say. When you've met great advisors, what is the things that they are doing that is different from the good advisors?
Yeah, great question. I think it probably comes down to a handful of values. And you're right. I mean, I sort of before starting the company, as you know, I immersed myself in this industry for well over a year and got to just meet a lot of people, got to learn, got to see what actually is this industry, what are the foundations of it, and ultimately the value that gets created. And so Along the way, I met some really, really awesome people. And I think that's what excited my passion to kind of build in this industry and help elevate advisors. Because what I saw is like really, really great advisors actually do genuinely care about their clients. They make it their life's mission to make sure that somebody can achieve their goals, whatever they may be. And it really starts from, like we said, the emotional part, right? Trying to truly understand who you are and make sure that, I am going not through the motions of just, what is recommended or some sort of like vehicle to kind of invest you in and whatnot. It's going through what ultimately is going to help you, regardless of what, tools and things are available out there. And then making sure that I'm consistently ahead of the game on your behalf, right? Like any anxiety you have, I'm there a step before you, right? Like, and I'm there for you and you can lean on that. Any sort of, life event or change that you're having, I'm prepared. I will be there proactively for you, right? And I think what I learned is that the really biggest challenge is even if you're a really, really great advisor and you're doing all these things that create value, there's only so many clients you can do that for. And that's, I think, what sort of like created the large opportunity where we saw it as, hey, how do you actually empower advisors to spend more of their time doing these great things, as opposed to sort of like today, which, we can get into more detail about, which is unfortunately not a lot of time to be able to do all the things you want to do for a client.
There's the point on value. So we've talked about the emotional side. You have a data point that I think is actually very interesting and ties the emotional to the quantitative, which is folks oftentimes, against their best interests, will pull money out of the market
Yes.
When things go down, and advisors can step in there. So maybe talk about that to just show that the value of an advisor, both on the emotional side as well as actually helping you generate higher returns, not by beating the markets, but by solving that personal relationship with money.
Absolutely. It's actually really funny, right? Like, because you think about, oh, every given year, there's all these things you can do to kind of optimize your wealth and whatnot. But really, the eventual outcome that you might have, the delta between a great outcome and not so great outcome, is 2-3 decisions you make throughout your entire lifetime. And those 2-3 decisions, a lot of the time, I mean, we're human beings, right? Like we let our fears, greed, emotions, anxiety, whatever it is, impact them. And unfortunately, a lot of the times they have really, really big kind of repercussions, right? So one of our board members and mentors, Bill McNabb, who's the former CEO of Vanguard, him and I spent a lot of time on this research that Vanguard did called the Advisor's Alpha, which is ultimately the value that an advisor can create. And actually, it's quite large. About half of it is behavioral, and half of it is exactly from moments like this, which is, panic selling or some sort of like other anxiety I have or bias I have that maybe my portfolio doesn't speak right the way that I internally kind of believe it. And so I'm bound to make a mistake, right? So like having that person there kind of guide you, almost like good friction point between you and decisions that could impact is great. And it's shown like economic or empirically that can provide a lot of value.
It's clear how advisors can be valuable. Now let's maybe talk a little bit about the market structure. So the way I see it, and we've talked about this a bunch, which is you have at the ultra high net worth segment, a bunch of firms, very bespoke,
Yep.
high-end services, doing a great job for their clients. And then for folks that are just starting to build their wealth journey, you have a lot of these robo-advisors, fully digital solutions. Talk about the middle, which is where you're building. Like what are the problems they're solving? What are the solutions out there in market, and why are you focused on that segment as opposed to the other two, which has probably gotten more attention both on the venture side as well as on the traditional bank side?
Yeah, for sure. So the primary sort of like segment that we're focused on is what's, in the industry known as kind of the mass affluent segment. Over the last decade, there's been one of the largest kind of growing segments, which is great because more people are building more wealth, and obviously this is America and it's the land of opportunity that lets you do that. However, today they're sort of stuck in this middle where, like you mentioned, there's all these DIY tools that are great for people just getting started out, optimizing their spending and their, debt and everything. But those tools don't really satisfy the needs that they have, right? Like they have more complicated, sophisticated needs. They're thinking about, I may sell my business and I have to think about my kids' college and I have to think about my estate, for the next generation. And it's a lot more sort of like services that today, unfortunately, the larger banks or the ones that kind of focus primarily on the ultra high net worth section, just it's not economical for them to service, and thus, they're not being serviced well. That's sort of like a lot of how the RIA kind of, channel got built, and, all the independent advisor movement, which we really, really believe in, and we think is the right kind of segment long term to create value in this industry. However, it's also really hard for the reasons we mentioned earlier to be able to provide really, really good service and constantly know that this segment is going to get the absolute best, most optimized advice without all the resources and the investment that I think the other two kind of like segments maybe have had more of. And we saw that as a really, really big opportunity to not only make a huge impact for all these families and, millions of people in this segment, but also naturally from being able to elevate a lot more of this value that advisors provide to more.
Amazing. I think that's a great segue into talking about Arca, what
Yes.
you're building. So yeah, tell us what Arca is and maybe frame it from the perspective of a new client coming to Arca and what the experience they will get.
So Arca's vision and mission is to deliver the highest possible quality financial advice in a very proactive, personalized, and efficient way. And we do this through financial advisors because we fundamentally believe it's the power of that human and emotion that we talked about that enables really, really great outcomes. So as a new client coming to Arca, you get paired with a financial advisor. That financial advisor will meet you where you are, whether you want to meet them in person, or you want to meet them virtually, or you want to talk to them on the phone, or just exchange emails. It shouldn't matter. We will be there. We'll be able to guide you, understand what are your goals, what are the challenges, where have you had sort of like anxiety maybe on your wealth, and then be able to build a really personalized plan for you with all the sets and tools and things that enables you to achieve those goals. And sort of, continue with you throughout this journey. And this journey may be 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? Until the time that, sort of like you've achieved all the things you want to do. And we want to be that first place you think of that takes you all the way there and that shoulder you can lean on to get to your goals.
Nice. And so you touched on a piece that's very critical to this story, and we're going to talk more about, which is the human element,
Yep.
right? A lot of fintechs are trying to automate away the advisor or build that fully automated relationship. You have taken a very different approach, and you've touched on this a little bit with your thinking about kind of the emotional element. But yeah, talk about the decision to build an AI-enabled wealth firm as opposed to a fully AI wealth firm that replaces the human advisor entirely.
Yeah, good point. So we thought long and hard about this and kind of spending a lot of time with this segment and the RA kind of channel and understanding I feel like the two or three kind of things that came away with is one, historically over the last, maybe decade or so, I think people looked at the kind of overwhelmed burden advisor who had to stitch together 12 different tools and data and just to keep the lights on as friction. And, the kind of wave of, a lot of the fintechs was let's remove the friction, right? And hence remove the advisor. But in reality, what happened is that friction was actually passed down to the end client because now the end client was in charge of their portfolio. They had to figure out tax rules and optimizations. They had to think about what a state even is and how do I do that? And more importantly, all the anxiety was passed down to them, and they didn't have somebody to kind of share, the value. So, as we looked into what is the value of an advisor and how do you empower and elevate more of the value, we learned that advisors, just generally how the industry is built and how the technology framework, today and the stack exists, unfortunately aren't able to spend a lot of their time doing these kind of things for clients that drive this value. So we decided that instead we were going to empower the advisor. We were going to basically build automation instead of replacing the advisor, removing all this friction that the advisor has so they can fully focus on the part that, this particular client segment, but in general on the part that we've seen has proven over and over again truly delivers value to these clients. So in our sort of vision, our advisors should not be spending any time on sort of, admin work and being able to kind of put together things in one place to service their clients. We want our advisors to only think about their clients all the time and think about all the various optimizations and the various kind of advice and how to even deliver that advice. And similarly, our clients to feel like we are there for them, we're going to help them, and they're the only ones that matter and the only ones in the room. when an advisor is working with them.
It's great. So I want to double click on the advisor side, right? So we've talked a lot about the clients, and it's clear that you are building both for the client, but also for the advisor. And it's funny you used an airplane analogy, because I also have a plane analogy, which is I think of what you're building as building a cockpit for an advisor, where they go in and, as you mentioned, as opposed to using 12 or 15 different disjointed tools, they come in and they have one solution. They log in and everything gets handled in that platform. Maybe not playing golf with a client, but everything else. So talk about your first principles approach to rebuilding the advisor workflow from the ground up, and maybe give some tangible examples. I've gotten to see the demo. I know you've gotten a lot of feedback from your wealth team advisors. So yeah, talk about how you decided what it looks like to rebuild this product. And again, what are some examples of how this really transformed their lives such that they can go out and serve more clients, have more face time, and deliver a better product experience?
I think it started with just immersing ourselves in various advisory firms and just understanding what are all the things that ultimately, an advisor or the team actually around them. There's, a pretty meaningful group of people behind the advisor who actually do a lot of work as well. And so we looked at it holistically and said, what are the actions or things that ultimately an advisor should be doing that create a lot of value for their client, and a lot of what we touched on earlier, and what are all the things that are getting in the way of that? And as we looked at all the things that are getting in the way of that, we realized that they didn't need another tool. There's actually a lot of tools in the industry, and that's the problem to begin with. There's too many tools. What we realized is that we had to kind of rethink this a little bit differently. We had to sort of figure out, if you were to just forget the existing stack today, if you just take it from the first principles of what a client needs and what an advisor needs to be able to service the client in the best way possible, how do you build the kind of system that enables that? And that effectively ended up being us building a fully vertically integrated AI native platform where we build for actually agents and AI first, because we just assume that 80-90% of the work will be done by the agents, but then give the advisors all the visibility and all the opportunity and tools for that last sort of 5-10%, which is that client piece where the human really, really matters, to be able to execute on and be able to create value. And so over time, we've seen a pretty big shift in how when our clients come in and we capture information about them, whether it's through meetings or whether it's through various documents or statements that they give us, our advisors are always a step ahead, because they have this system behind them that's constantly putting together the latest, most kind of opportunistic information about a client that we know, and also recommendations and various things that they can sort of immediately go and deliver that value to the client.
Could you talk about some of those, either those recommendations or some of those agentic workflows? Because I think when a lot of people, again, think of wealth tech, they think of the robo-advisors that will say, hey, you're 60% equities, 40% bonds, maybe you should go to 80-20 because of your risk profile, right? And that, of course, is part of what you're building, but is really a small piece. So maybe talk about some of those sort of specific recommendations that the human augmented by agents provides to the clients.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll maybe give you a few examples. So one, when our clients sort of come in, right, and our AI kind of native system alongside the advisor are trying to understand what are the goals that they have, what are the challenges that they have. A lot of the recommendations come down to edits before we even talk about portfolio, right? Because we see the portfolio as a tool to help you get there. Our agents are able to help our advisors understand what are the sort of maybe biases or hot buttons or different things that this client has, right? That maybe they don't even themselves realize, right, as they're kind of speaking. And a lot of the time we try to really incorporate a lot of that in our planning methodology, because like we said, right, the behavioral piece is incredibly important. And so that's one example, right, of having the advisor having almost a second set of eyes to capture all these little signals that make a really, really big difference on the journey of that client throughout time. Or other elements a lot of the time when it goes to the more execution piece, which is actually deploying you to the portfolio and opening your accounts and whatnot, that's a lot of time that clients, during that phase, which is kind of the probably most anxious phase, of transferring your accounts from places and money in motion, and it's a new relationship you're building, it's really, really important that it happens fast and it happens in a way that like is being communicated incredibly well along the way. So we've built a lot of agents that help with, taking care of things like opening accounts and optimizing for the right account split and how should portfolio be deployed across those accounts. So that way, not only we're removing a lot of sort of inefficiency from what the advisors have to do, but we're also delivering a much better client experience during this time that we know is sort of like high anxiety through the process.
So I want to hear about a specific example of when an advisor logs into the platform. What are the benefits that they're capturing from agents working on their behalf?
Yeah, for sure. So, for example, let's say an advisor logs into the platform and, they know that in 20 minutes they have a meeting with a client. What the agent has done throughout this time is it's gone through the entire history of the relationship with that client, any new kind of interaction we've had with that client, whether it's from email, whether they were working with somebody else on the support staff, any decisions we've made on their portfolio or their plan and changes we've made and whatnot, and any new information they've given us. And so all of that gets summarized and prepared for the advisor in a way that they can very quickly get up to speed in the sort of like relationship that they're about to go enter and discuss about. But more than that, like here's opportunity areas that we see, optimizations. And again, these are provided to the advisors, and ultimately, they are the ones delivering and they will decide what's kind of most important. But we want them to have all this information at the tip of their fingers with every conversation, both from a kind of more personal, emotional element of what's important to make sure that the client, has this peace of mind that we're taking care of their money, but also just more tactically what's needed, right? And then once that meeting, has ended, our agents like immediately sort of like get to work on all the other stuff that needs to happen. Things from, updating the state of the world of what is now the latest after this conversation, various things that we have decided on the meeting that we're going to do, even suggestions on little things that they picked up that maybe would be a good additional touch, right? Like we talked about, or maybe would be an optimization to think about maybe 3 months from now, right? Because they mentioned that eventually they're going to, I don't know, maybe like sell their house or change their job and whatnot. So all of this kind of like second brain is constantly being updated, and then go in and doing work. Things like opening accounts, right, for trading, or suggesting optimizations on the portfolio, etc. So that way the advisors have this complete kind of like unified journey and the system around them that's helping them make sure they're delivering the best possible work for every client.
The other thing I like that you're building is, in addition to all of the sort of pre and post meeting workflows, you're actually building this platform where an advisor can log in and just see all of the highest value things that they can be doing right now. It's like a task list on steroids. And it's something I think we all would want in our daily lives, but it's really only enabled because every single thing they do occurs on this single platform. And so I think that's something that, again, can only be done because you have that full visibility across an advisor's work.
Exactly. And that was our thesis from day one, right? Like unify all the data layer, unify all the application layer. That gives your agents the biggest opportunity and autonomy to be able to not only have the latest information in the world, but also be able to execute and do things and go from point A to point C to point Z, right? Across the entire platform. And that way, as they're kind of learning who the client is, how does the advisor operate, what are the things that create value, what are the outcomes we're generating, they're able to now suggest things, right? That otherwise, I mean, again, advisors would certainly be able to do, but it'd be very, very difficult to do all the time for every single client at scale, right? Like if you ask, I mean, this has been, my conversations with advisors are always like the most fun and fascinating, because you truly do understand and see that like they really care about doing great work. And if you ask any advisor, like if you just had one client, what are all the things that you would do for them? And it'd be like 20 things, like all the time. But in reality, where you don't have just one client, unfortunately, you can maybe only do 2 or 3. And we're trying to break that paradigm, right? That it enables you to do everything you possibly do about the client, despite the fact that, you have a lot more clients to kind of take care of. And that's how you scale your impact as well.
I love that framing. I love that. Like, if you only had one client, if you asked an advisor this, it's clear there's so many things they would do.
Yep.
But of course, I mean, apart from certain types of clients, most of these advisors don't just have one client. And so can AI really unlock that mass personalization at scale?
Yeah, and like we say, like our vision is to make each client feel like they're the advisor's only client, while at the same time that advisor can scale their impact to 3, 4 times more clients than they ever could. But, obviously I'd ask you the same question. I'd be curious your investor perspective on the trade-offs between building an AI native kind of services business versus an AI enabled software first business.
Yeah, and I definitely think there are pros and cons to both sides, but I think what attracts me to the AI services approach is the opportunity you have to create a truly differentiated product. So by owning that full stack of the relationship, in this case, the wealth management relationship with a client, both the technology and the human delivery, you really are able to give them a fully rethought of solution from the ground up around their wealth advisory, around their wealth relationship. And so I think what that allows you to do is both give a improved product experience, as well as capture more of the economics and build that really, really durable relationship that becomes difficult to replace. That being said, I don't think it's easy, as you know well, and really you need to marry the technology with the change management as you're going into working with seasoned entrepreneurs in different industries, and so I think it has a bigger upside, but also carries greater risks and potentially lower scalability as you could deploy the software to tens of thousands of advisors, which is much harder in this model. So again, I think pros and cons to both, but when I think of where you could build the very, very large business that can have the level of impact that I know you want to have on this ecosystem and frankly on the society at large, I really think owning that client relationship full stack is what's so critical.
Yeah, agree.
So I know you have a very active Slack channel with your advisors. And I've seen screenshots of some of those pieces of feedback. And what's fantastic is you're getting this feedback constantly.
Correct.
Right? Because you're building for your own team.
Correct.
Can you share some of the feedback you've gotten thus far and how, if an advisor joins Arca today, how different it feels for them than the other places they've worked where they had, again, the 15 different systems that they were bouncing between?
One of the kind of really critical core values that we tried to establish in the engineering team, especially early on, was that we're here to service two major constituents. It's our clients and it's the people servicing the clients, which is advisors and everyone else. And so we've designed everything we do, everything we build, the product, the platform, around making sure that these two constituents get the most amount of value as possible. And so when it came to the advisors and our internal kind of platform that advisors use, again, because we're building for our own team, we can be very creative. We can put certain things in product that enable us to get this time of real-time feedback. So we've built a lot of places where advisors with the click of a button can immediately tell us whether something is helpful, whether something is, could be optimized and et cetera. And so that's sort of like how we're able to get so much feedback constantly from our advisors. And a lot of it, it begins with, as in the early days, right? Like there's certain maybe areas or gaps or things that we had. But more recently, what's been fascinating to see is they've sort of really embraced the AI and the agents that we're doing and are now working with us to help train it based on their subject matter expertise of 1, 2, 3 decades of work that they've done with clients. So a lot of the feedback, more or less these days is like, AI was great, but here's how we can make it even better. Here's how we can teach it. Here's how we can tune it on certain things. And of course, our engineering team is fascinating by all of that and really, really excited, as you've seen when
I have.
you've come to the office about all the feedback we get. And I think when it comes to the model as well, in terms of how we're building the company, when you put these two great groups of people who have a shared goal and a mission working together so closely, you're bound to be very creative and you're bound to kind of go to that next level of value you can build.
The feedback loop is just incredibly short here because again, one of your two major constituents are your own teammates.
Correct.
Right? And so they're constantly giving you, and I've seen a lot of these pieces of feedback, lots of emojis, and yeah, I think it's an ability to ship incredibly fast, incredibly impactful product.
Correct.
Because there is no gap. There's no account managers or user interface researchers or anything of that nature. It's just your own team.
Correct.
I want to click on one thing, which is a book actually that you recommended. Well, you've recommended to many, many people, but have recommended to me as well, which is a book called Unreasonable Hospitality about the founding of 11 Madison Park,
Correct.
which is one of the fanciest and best restaurants in New York. Um, it's an interesting book because it talks about, of course, building a restaurant and the hospitality that goes into it. But there's a lot of learnings that can be extrapolated for other industries. And clearly, it's really resonated with you. So I'm curious, what have you picked up from that book about the restaurant industry, which I
Yep.
think most people would probably not directly connect to the wealth management space. But yeah, what have you leveraged from that as you've begun building Arca?
Yeah, absolutely. I read that book actually around the week that we started the company, which was very, very great time to read that book. I think as you alluded to, right, like the book talks about the restaurant industry, the service, but it's not just about what happens in a restaurant. It's what does it take to be the best?
Mhm.
Because Will and team sort of effectively made EMP the best restaurant in the world. And so for me, that was a really, really clear picture and learnings of in a service-based industry, which is what we are. Wealth management, at the end of the day, is a service-based industry, right? Like Arca is a technology-enabled service-based company. So for us, the learnings there were how do you push the bar and ultimately create this like incredible client experiences, and what does it take to be the place and the brand that everybody wants to kind of work with and get help. And so from the very early days, I tried to kind of instill as much as I could. Obviously, we're still only a year into our journey and a lot more work to do. But I tried to instill these values in the team from the very early days. We have this book in the office. I make sure that everyone takes it and
And hopefully
and
reads
reads
it.
it, hopefully. And so, but I think kind of why this book is so important to me, additionally, is our first wealth management team that we're working with, that are our partners and co-workers now. One of the kind of founding advisor partners there, Paul, him and I met, and on our first conversation, we talked about two books that have sort of totally changed our mindset about how this industry should work. And that is Unreasonable Hospitality and Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, who's, I'm grateful is an advisor to us and has really helped us think through this entire behavioral psychology part of wealth. And so we really bonded and connected over how they, at their scale and efforts, had really embraced this kind of service element of the business, like little touches, little things that go a long way. And so we got really excited together about what would that look like if you could scale it, but in a really, really personalized way, in a way that you could, again, remove all this friction and all this like inefficiency that the team spends times on today, and enable them to do more of that, to truly build like a really, really great services company.
Are there any fun examples of personalized touches that the team out in Portsmouth leveraged across your time working with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the clients that kind of we work with, one of our larger clients, they mentioned in one of their calls that they were kind of overwhelmed. There was a lot going on with their family. They had this sort of like big, family event that was happening, and they were having a hard time thinking about that, and also kind of working, on some of the stuff that we were working with them on when it relates to their portfolio. And Paul actually ended up sending them like this like really, really massive plate for like 100 people of foods and goods and all these things, and sent a really note that was like, hey, I picked up on our conversation that you were stressed and anxious about this, so hopefully this helps take care of everyone there and alleviates kind of pain. And of course they were incredibly grateful, they were incredibly excited, and it's those little things that even makes our team be excited to kind of do more and do better for them.
It's amazing. You've touched on a few of the folks that are a part of this journey at
Mhm.
Arca. So you talked about Bill from Vanguard, Morgan, Paul, the first advisor to join the platform. You've assembled a very unique team, I think it's safe to say. So you've got, again, all of those folks in conjunction with this incredible team of engineers building in New York from companies like Plaid, Stripe, Rippling, among others. And so, yeah, I'd love to get a sense of how do you bring all of these people together, given their very diverse backgrounds, to execute and really drive towards this important mission at Arca?
Yeah, I think, I mean, what you just said, it really starts with the mission and vision and the value alignment at its highest. I think one of the things that this group, and as you know, beyond this group, even people like Jason Wang from Altruist and Peter Crawford from Schwab and others, um, the thing that connected us from day one is that there is a better value that you can create for clients here, and everything else comes down from there, right? Like if at the highest kind of level that mission and alignment is really really strong, then it's a lot easier to, regardless what background you come from, to be excited to kind of roll up your sleeves and work together. I mean, I don't know, like in the early days of this, like I didn't think that, like, our engineers would kind of like be so excited to like go up to, our wealth management company that we work with and spend time with there and get deep in their workflows and be in client meetings and sort of like be part of delivering advice, and then vice versa. Our advisors and everyone come to the team like talking to us about AI and what our agents can do and should be doing, and leaning so heavily into it. So I think all of those kind of more kind of maybe tactical little things all stem down from the fact that we have one shared goal and one shared vision and alignment on what we're trying to achieve here. And I think that's probably been my favorite part about the company building journey so far, is that you can bring incredible people from any background, and it doesn't matter what their background is, because we have a shared goal that we're working together on.
You touched on the engineers working closely with the first advisory team in New Hampshire. Can you? I know you've done a few trips up there.
Yeah.
And again, I think to your point, it is a non-obvious pairing, but then when you think of that through line of delivering this value for clients, it actually really makes sense. But certainly very different. The first team, multi-decade experience building their own wealth business. I mean, fantastic entrepreneurs on their own side. And then again, this incredible group of engineers based in New York. Maybe share some lessons learned and even some specific stories of kind of merging those teams initially as you've been scaling Arca.
Yeah, absolutely. We from day one made sure that that bond was going to be really, really close and special. That's why we made deliberate efforts, from us going up there and them kind of coming down multiple times, as we were kind of even in the exploration phase of like, what are we even building, right? What are the workflows in the first place? But I think every time we've gone with the team, it's just been fantastic. Like, you get to see people at the end of the day who just genuinely care. They care about the clients, they care about the business, they care about the work that they're doing. And so I think that's been, and again, we're in our own kind of tech world sometimes, and don't kind of see the rest of the world as much as maybe we should. And so having that, being able to kind of be exposed to that culture of care and value, and working together incredibly well. I mean, the team has been together for a very long time, working together. So I think that's been really kind of special and a fascinating learning. And so when we went up earlier this year, when we were kind of launching a lot of our tools and product, I just saw this like really, really unique drive from the team, where they wanted to make sure it was perfect and they wanted to make sure it was special. And we have pictures and recording stuff from like 6 a.m. in the office, kind of like making sure we're ready for the next day. And
6 a.m. starting all night,
all
not
night,
getting
correct.
in at 6.
No,
Yeah, yeah.
not sorry. Awake all night for multiple nights in a row, and Claude Code building on the train, and all these different things. But yeah, I think the drive and push, and I think them seeing how much our engineering team here cares about and listens to what their challenges are and their ideas on how to make things better, has also like really, really helped in that. And then of course we partied together, so that helps too.
I think it's safe to say you are talent obsessed. And you've talked about identifying these folks that are really mission driven across all of these different backgrounds. I'm curious, what's your approach to hiring and convincing people to join? Because I think this is a critical question, not just for Arca, not just for the wealth management industry, but really for all of technology businesses more broadly. And I think you have a very specific perspective on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So primarily when we hire, we first and foremost are looking for that mission vision kind of alignment. It is core to everything we do. Again, I say it again, we are in the services business. Like, to us, our client is incredibly important. And we want to make sure that we absolutely have this sort of like as the core thing that everybody joining us understands. I think from there, we really look for people who we think one day can and should be building their own companies. We think about people who are, incredibly hardworking and motivated and, can be creative to like get resources around them and just do things, right? And then lastly, incredible focus on product mindedness. Because as you know, right, like with the advent of all the various AI coding tools, the execution layer for the most part, to some extent, has been commoditized. And so I think it's even more important than ever for people to kind of really be obsessed with who is the user, what is the user trying to accomplish, what is the best, most optimized way for that user to accomplish that, and then how does that translate into product thinking, product design, all of this. So we tend to kind of think that we keep a fairly lean team of people who, in our minds, play the role of both technology leader and product leader and client service leader, working with our customers directly, and then can scale their execution via all the great kind of AI tools in front of them.
Makes sense. You touched on sort of commoditization at the execution layer
Yes.
and talked about being a services business a few times. So I want to touch on a very hot and contentious topic in the world of investing and venture today, which is thinking about AI-enabled software versus AI services. Um, you're building this amazing technology platform, which we've touched on, and there's two approaches there, right? One is what you are doing, which is owning the end-to-end stack, working with advisors around the country and deploying that into their systems and effectively bringing on these clients as your customers. But the other approach would be to distribute this technology to other wealth firms around the country, of which there are many, and certainly would get a lot of value from what you're
Absolutely.
building. Why did you take the approach that you did? And yeah, how did you think about that trade-off? Because there are benefits and drawbacks to both.
I mean, look, I do think ultimately this is an incredibly large industry. I do think both models are going to be successful in their own ways. I think for us, there's probably two elements that really, really were core as we thought about building the company and building it this way. The first one was just primarily from just a business kind of durability perspective. To us, being in the wealth industry, having that direct client relationship, building the kind of muscle of I don't just understand the advisor as a customer, but I understand the end client as a customer, and I'm able to service them really, really well, was really, really important because that's ultimately informs the type of software for advisors we built, right? Because again, it's always kind of like client first. And then as we, kind of seen a lot of this maybe like more software middle layer and what's happening, I do think that the labs are going to continue to kind of do more and more there as the models get better. To us, from a just durability perspective, being, again, having that relationship, having the data that gets created as a result of it, working with these firms who've, been around for 5, 10, 15, 20 years sometimes, that's all data and resources, right, that we can leverage to kind of build better product, and it's proprietary to us. So from a business kind of like durability perspective, we felt that was incredibly critical. In addition to being enabling you to also build a brand, right, around that consumer directly as well as the advisor. The second reason was, as we thought about the more kind of like mission element of the company, which is at the end of the day, how do you ensure that you're delivering the highest quality possible financial advice at all times? To me, it was hard to kind of see a world where, you can build the greatest software, you can build the greatest tool, but at the end of the day, it comes down to what advisor is adopting the software, at what scale, at level are they adopting it? And then do you understand the impact that it's having to the end client? And for us, that impact to the end client was really, really big. And so by building an RIA services company on top of this, AI platform, it essentially gives us this 360 view of the entire business. It gives us a view of every single decision that gets made on a client journey ever. And it lets us map to the outcomes it created. And it lets us take those outcomes and be like, well, which are the ones that move the biggest needle, right? Which are the ones that were most optimized? And then how do we productize those? How do we compound on those outcomes to ultimately achieve what we want, which is the delivery of great financial advice, not just a tool to enable, advice. So I would say those two probably are the reasons why we decided to build the company this way. But like I said, I do think both models have value. maybe flipping it the other way as an investor. Your thoughts on investing in sort of like a services first, AI kind of human enabled business, and maybe pros and cons as you see.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think there's pros and cons to both. Um, Look, I think that if you own that full end-to-end experience, as you talked about, and really can deliver value across that value chain, there's a lot that you can unlock, right? And certainly, durability is seeming the word du jour, and there is a lot of execution risk and difficulty of doing some of the work you talked about of bringing the AI-enabled platform into these
Yep.
advisory teams, having them actually utilize them, making sure that it really delivers a fantastic end client for your end result for your customer. But if you are able to accomplish all of that, you really do build this unique relationship that is not just a software layer, is something much more visceral, emotional, as you talked about earlier, which allows you to both distribute more products and build a more holistic offering for your customer, and also, from a more investing perspective, reduce the likelihood of churn by just again not by lock-in, but by building that better product. But I think it's very fair to acknowledge the drawbacks to this approach, which is the scalability question. And so, it certainly is faster to provide this fantastic technology to others who then actually go and capture much of the value from it. And so I think there is a trade-off, but if you are able to bring on the fantastic advisors that you've so far been able to do, if you are able to really get them to leverage this technology, you build a more comprehensive business that I think will stand the test of time.
Cool.
But not easy, as you know. I want to double click on sort of this concept of the multi-product fintech thesis, which is something that we spend a lot of time thinking about across the fintech portfolio, both B2C and B2B, is this opportunity. You land with a wedge product, you build trust with a customer, and then you have the right to cross-sell additional products and services. I think this is something that you definitely see in the wealth space. I'm curious how you're thinking about that as you build Arca. What else can you deliver for your clients after you've really nailed the advisory portion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the vision of the company is to deliver any financial related service that anybody in our segment who can and should be, our client needs. And to us, that goes beyond just wealth advising, right? Like wealth advising is probably the core kind of element of somebody's entire financial picture, but there's a lot of auxiliary things like tax or estate planning or insurance or other, even like, to some extent family office services that this segment, deserves and needs to kind of have as a holistic kind of full picture. So our vision is to be able to enable that. I mean, right, like in the sort of the DIY market that we talked about, like there's the advent of like the super apps where, you could get sort of like various products in this kind of way. I think of us, and I won't take credit for this. One of our other investors coined this, but I'd like us to become the super service for this segment. So being able to enable pretty much a holistic entire financial kind of life and value for them through what we're doing at Arca and our advisors and other kind of folks at the company.
And why is wealth advisory, I should say, the right entry point to offering that super service? Because a customer could come in through any of those other doors, and you could have decided to start there. So why, if the end result is this full collection of financial products, why wealth advisory to start with?
Yeah, I think I would say a few reasons. So back to when we were speaking earlier about the value of having somebody who truly understands your life end to end, right? Like we don't think of wealth as just like a utility that needs to be kind of completed, check the box, and sort of like move on, right? For us, like wealth is, or just in general for the industry, the job of an advisor is to sort of like play that holistic role and picture in your financial life. And if the advisor truly understands all the various opportunities, optimizations, challenges, problems you're trying to solve, we're going to do a better job at enabling those other elements because we have this deep kind of understanding of what that looked like and the needs that you have. So to us, it's always felt like building that initial relationship, even in the other, I would say, kind of segments, right? Like a lot of the times, if somebody's sort of like, starting maybe with like tax or estate and whatnot, most of the time, if you have an advisor, they're part of the picture because they are that sort of like person that you're leaning on to kind of think through your entire life holistically. And we wanted to make sure that core foundation and DNA of the company was really, really good before we started expanding into some of these other services.
To use an overused sports analogy, they're the quarterback.
Correct. Of your entire financial life.
Correct. I want to fast forward 10 years to the future and thinking about what Arca can become. And we talked a little bit about from a product perspective, but if we zoom out and think about really the value that you can drive on this important mission, what do you want to solve?
Yeah. So I think 10 years from now, the world is changing so quickly. A lot of things will change probably in the next 10 years. But overall, 10 years from now, I would love for us to be thought of as the place where people know they're going to get the clarity and confidence to solve any financial problem that they have in their life. And we become the place that's able to prove that we can do that at a much, much, much higher degree of service, much greater value, much more personalized and much more efficient, holistically across every aspect of somebody's life. And yes, I mean, early part of the journey, but very, very confident and excited to be able to do that.
Amazing. Last question. If someone can take away just one thing from this conversation, what do you want them to take away about Arca and what you're building?
I would say the one takeaway is that I fundamentally believe what we're doing is important. I fundamentally believe financial advice is really, really important. If more people had access to great financial advice, I think they'd be able to achieve a lot more with their very, very hard-earned kind of money and sacrifice and luck to some extent, right, along the way. And so I do think we have an opportunity to create the kind of company that hopefully is here for decades, well beyond our times, and is able to do that at a really, really good scale. And if anybody is sort of like excited about the mission that we're doing, we could take all the help we can get. So
amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.